It was the morning of the flight he'd been waiting for. Mark had been working non-stop for the past few weeks, saving every penny he could. His life had always been a struggle, but this trip was his way out. He needed to get to a new city, where he could find better opportunities and hopefully change the direction his life had been heading. The airport buzzed with the usual chaos, people rushing, flights being announced, and the noise of rolling suitcases on the hard floors. Mark couldn't help but feel a little anxious. It was a critical moment. This flight could lead to something big. He stood in line at the security checkpoint, his mind racing. The past few years hadn't been kind to him. A series of dead-end jobs, bad decisions, and constant financial strain had left him wondering if things would ever get better. But this trip, this flight, was his chance to make a change. He had a job lined up in another city, a fresh start. And it seemed like everything was falling into place. He finally made it to the boarding gate, and as he sat down, he checked his watch. There was still an hour until the flight. He tried to distract himself, flipping through the news on his phone, but the feeling of tension didn't go away. He couldn't shake the thought of how much was riding on this. As he sat there, his eyes wandered across the airport. People were coming and going, rushing through the terminal, oblivious to the life-changing moments happening around them. Then, he saw her. An elderly woman sat a few rows away, looking lost and confused. She was dressed in a worn, beige coat, her face creased with age. She had a small carry-on bag at her feet, but no one seemed to be helping her. Mark noticed how she kept glancing around, unsure of what to do next. Most people were too focused on their own lives to notice, but Mark couldn't ignore her. He had been raised to respect his elders, and something inside him told him to go over and help. He hesitated for a moment, glancing at his watch again. He still had plenty of time, but the thought of missing the flight made him nervous. However, something about the way she looked, the helplessness in her eyes, pulled him in. He stood up and walked over to her. "Excuse me, ma'am. Are you okay?" he asked, trying to sound as calm and reassuring as possible. The woman looked up, startled, but then her face softened. "Oh, dear. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to look so lost. I'm trying to find my way to the gate for my flight." Mark glanced at her ticket, which she handed to him. "It's just down the hall," he said, pointing. "I'll walk you there." The woman nodded, her face grateful. As they walked together, she explained that she had been traveling alone for several days. She had been to visit her daughter, who lived in another city, and now she was heading home. But in the confusion of the airport, she had lost track of the time and couldn't figure out where to go next. Mark listened to her as they walked, offering a kind word here and there. It wasn't much, but for her, it seemed like a lot. By the time they reached the gate, she thanked him repeatedly. "You're a good man. It's hard to find people like you these days," she said, her voice warm with appreciation. Mark smiled, a little embarrassed by the praise. "It was no trouble, really," he replied. "I'm just glad I could help." She smiled back, but there was something about the moment that stuck with him. He had just done something good, something small, but it felt significant. As he turned to leave, the woman called after him. "I hope your flight goes well," she said. Mark nodded, but as he walked back to his seat, he found himself thinking about her words. She had no idea what was going on in his life, but somehow, in that brief interaction, he had made her feel safe. He had helped her in a way that felt right. And for the first time in a long while, Mark felt like he had done something meaningful. Still, he couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. He glanced at his boarding pass again. He had just helped this woman, but now he was about to miss his own flight. Was it the right choice? He had been working so hard to get to this point. This trip was supposed to change everything for him. But was it worth it? As the minutes passed, Mark sat down in his seat, feeling a pang of guilt. His flight was about to board, but he had missed it. There was no going back now. He had made a choice, and it wasn't a choice that anyone else would have made. It wasn't a choice he had even planned on making. And yet, as the announcement came over the loudspeaker, saying the last boarding call for his flight, Mark didn't feel regret. Instead, he felt a strange sense of peace. The decision had been made, and there was no turning back. He had helped someone in need, and maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. As the doors to the gate closed behind him, Mark took a deep breath and leaned back in his seat. He wasn't sure if it was the right thing to do, but at that moment, he knew he had done the best thing he could. And for now, that had to be enough. The days following the missed flight were a blur for Mark. He didn't have time to fully process what had happened. Life kept pushing him forward. He was back to his usual routine, waking up early, working long hours, and trying to make ends meet. The missed flight loomed in the back of his mind, but it wasn't the only thing on his plate. Mark had always been a man of responsibilities. He couldn't afford to waste time thinking about what could have been. He kept himself busy. His second job as a mechanic was exhausting. His hands were constantly covered in grease, and his back ached after every shift. But the work kept his mind off of things. The menial tasks of fixing broken machines, replacing parts, and solving problems that had no emotional weight, these were the things Mark could focus on. It was easy to lose himself in the tasks. The hours slipped by unnoticed as he worked in the small, dimly lit garage. He didn't have the luxury of thinking about anything else. But no matter how busy he got, there was always a small part of him that would wander back to that woman, the elderly woman he'd helped at the airport. She seemed so fragile, so lost, yet her gratitude had stayed with him. He wondered if she'd made it back home safely. He hoped she had, but the thought of her, standing there alone, seemed to linger in his mind more than it should have. There were moments during his day when he would pause and remember her face, the way she had smiled at him with such appreciation. It wasn't much, but in a life where Mark had always struggled to find meaning, it felt like something. He wasn't the kind of person who did good deeds for recognition, but for some reason, helping her had felt different. It had felt like a small spark of humanity in the middle of everything else that was going wrong in his life. Despite his internal musings, life moved on. Mark had a small apartment on the outskirts of town, a modest place with chipped paint and old furniture. He didn't mind. It was his space, a place where he could get some peace away from the world. But even in that quiet, familiar space, his mind kept returning to that moment at the airport. Should he have taken the flight? Should he have pushed past his instinct to help her? The questions didn't have easy answers, but they didn't stop him from asking them over and over again. One evening, after a particularly grueling day at work, Mark collapsed onto his couch, exhausted. The tiny apartment felt even smaller that night. He flipped through a few channels on the TV, trying to distract himself. But nothing held his attention. His eyes kept drifting to the corner of the room where his backpack sat. He had missed his flight, and now the job opportunity he had been hoping for seemed to be slipping away. He had nothing else to do but wait. Wait for another chance. Wait for the universe to give him something better. But as he waited, something strange happened. He couldn't shake the feeling that helping that woman wasn't just a random act of kindness, it had meant something more. He felt like there was something bigger at play, something beyond his understanding. The phone rang, cutting through the silence of the room. Mark picked it up, not recognizing the number. He didn't get many calls, and when he did, they were usually about bills or work. "Hello," he answered, his voice flat from fatigue. "Is this Mark?" a soft voice asked on the other end of the line. "Yeah, this is Mark," he replied, still unsure of who it was. The voice was familiar, but he couldn't place it. "I'm not sure if you remember me, but I'm the woman you helped at the airport a few days ago. Mark sat up straighter, his heart suddenly beating a little faster. He remembered her face instantly, but he hadn't expected to hear from her again. "Oh, yes, I remember you," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Thank you again for your help. I've been meaning to reach out to you," she continued, her voice warm but a little nervous. "I've been thinking about our conversation, and I wanted to thank you properly." Mark was taken aback. It had been such a brief interaction, yet here she was, calling him out of the blue. "You didn't have to do that," he said, his words a little more sincere than he had intended. "I know, but I wanted to," she said. "You helped me when I really needed it, and I can't just forget about it." Mark didn't know what to say. He was speechless, not expecting this kind of response at all. A few seconds of silence passed before she spoke again. "Actually," she said, "I'd like to meet with you if you have some time. I have something I'd like to discuss." Mark's heart skipped a beat. What could she want to talk about? He'd helped her, but it hadn't been anything special. It was just a small act of kindness. Yet, there was something about her voice, something in the way she spoke, that made him feel like this wasn't just a simple thank you call. "Sure, I can meet," he said cautiously. "When and where?" She gave him the details, and they agreed to meet the next afternoon at a small coffee shop near his apartment. Mark hung up the phone, feeling a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. He hadn't expected this. It wasn't often that people reached out to him like this. Most people were too busy with their own lives to care about a stranger's small acts of kindness. The rest of the evening felt like it dragged on forever. Mark couldn't stop thinking about the call. He didn't know what to expect from the meeting, but he had a feeling that something important was going to happen. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe she just wanted to thank him in person. But there was a nagging feeling in the back of his mind that told him this encounter wasn't going to be as simple as that. The next day, Mark found himself at the coffee shop a little earlier than he had planned. He wasn't sure why, but he felt a need to be there first. He didn't want to seem too eager, but his mind was racing with possibilities. What could she want to talk about? Was this some kind of test? He didn't know. But he knew one thing: after this conversation, nothing was going to be the same. The coffee shop was small, tucked away on a quiet street. Mark had been there before, but today, it felt different. There was something about the place, something about the way the sunlight streamed through the windows, that made the air feel heavier. Maybe it was the anticipation of meeting the woman again, or maybe it was the strange feeling that this conversation was going to change something in his life. He sat at a corner table, nervously stirring his coffee. His mind was racing. He had no idea what to expect from this meeting. He had helped a woman at the airport, something he had done countless times before for strangers. But there was something about her calm demeanor, her gratitude that stuck with him more than he had expected. She had seemed so genuine, so different from the people he was used to dealing with. Mark glanced at his watch. She was running late, but it didn't bother him. He was used to waiting. Life had taught him patience, especially in times when things didn't go as planned. He had learned not to expect too much. But today was different. Today, he felt like something was about to change. Just as he was starting to wonder if she was going to show up, the door opened. A woman walked in, and Mark looked up. His heart skipped a beat. It was her. The elderly woman from the airport. She walked in with the same steady, graceful movements, and even though she was older, there was a certain strength in her step. Her coat, which had seemed worn and tired the last time he saw her, now looked freshly pressed. Her eyes, though tired, still had the warmth that Mark remembered. She smiled when she saw him. "Mark," she said, her voice soft but filled with warmth. "I'm glad you could meet with me." He stood up quickly, offering her a seat. Of course, he said, feeling slightly awkward. He didn't know how to begin. He had no idea why she wanted to meet him, and the nerves started to creep back into his chest. The woman sat down and placed her small handbag beside her. "I hope I'm not keeping you from anything important," she said kindly. Mark shook his head. "No, nothing important." She smiled, and for a moment, they just looked at each other in silence. It was a strange kind of silence, not uncomfortable, but filled with something unspoken. After a brief moment, she leaned forward slightly, her expression growing more serious. "You know," she began, "I've been thinking about our encounter at the airport. I couldn't get it out of my mind." Mark nodded, unsure of where this conversation was going. "I was just helping you. It wasn't a big deal." She shook her head slowly, as if she didn't quite agree with him. "To you, maybe it wasn't a big deal. But to me, it was." Mark furrowed his brow. "What do you mean?" The woman smiled softly. "You see, Mark, I'm not just any woman. I've had a long life, full of experiences, both good and bad. And along the way, I've learned that sometimes, the smallest actions can have the biggest impacts. The way you helped me at the airport wasn't just kindness. It was a sign. A sign that things aren't always as they seem." Mark didn't know how to respond. He felt a little uncomfortable with how deeply she was speaking. "I just helped you find your gate," he said, unsure of why it was such a big deal. "I don't think it's that deep." The woman smiled again, but there was a certain sadness in her eyes. "It's deeper than you think," she said softly. "The universe works in mysterious ways, Mark. It sends us signs when we need them most. And when you helped me, it felt like a sign to me. A sign that I was meant to meet you. That there was something I was supposed to give you, something I could help you with." Mark blinked. He wasn't sure if he understood what she was saying. This wasn't the kind of conversation he was used to having. People didn't just pop into his life and speak in such mysterious ways. It felt strange, but at the same time, he couldn't shake the feeling that what she was saying wasn't just nonsense. There was something about her calm, knowing demeanor that made him feel like she was telling the truth. "You don't even know me," Mark said, feeling a little uneasy. "Why would you think that?" She leaned back in her chair, her hands folded in front of her. "Because I know people, Mark. I've spent my life observing, learning from others. And there's something about you. I can see the weight you carry, the struggles you're facing. You're like so many others who are stuck in a cycle, never really able to break free. You've been working hard, fighting, but the system is stacked against you. And I think you've reached a point where you're starting to lose hope." Mark was taken aback. How did she know all that? He hadn't told her anything about his life. Yet, her words hit him right in the chest. It was as if she could see through him, past the mask he wore every day. "I'm not sure what you mean," he said quietly, trying to brush it off. She nodded slowly, as if she understood. "I know it's not easy. But sometimes, we need a little push, a little guidance. That's why I called you here today." Mark raised an eyebrow. "Guidance? What do you mean?" The woman smiled, her eyes sparkling with something Mark couldn't quite place. "I have something to offer you, Mark. Something that could change everything for you." Mark sat up straighter, intrigued but still unsure. "What do you mean?" The woman looked at him directly. "I have connections. Opportunities. I've spent my life building things, creating a life for myself, and now, I want to help others do the same. I can't promise anything, but I can offer you something that might be the breakthrough you've been looking for." Mark felt his heart race. Was this real? Was this really happening? She continued, "You helped me, Mark. Now let me help you. It's a simple exchange, really. You gave me something when I needed it, and now, I want to do the same for you. Mark wasn't sure if he could believe it. But something in her eyes told him that she was sincere. Maybe this was the break he had been waiting for, the chance to turn his life around. He sat back in his chair, taking a deep breath. For the first time in a long time, he felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something new. As he waited for her to arrive, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that this was the beginning of something significant. His heart raced a little faster with anticipation. What was going to happen next? He had no idea, but he was ready to find out. Mark sat there, the weight of the woman's words sinking in. He had always believed that people who had opportunities, people who lived successful lives, did so because they were somehow different. Maybe they were born into the right circumstances, or they knew the right people, or they just had some luck that he never seemed to get. He had never been one to expect much out of life. His days were filled with hard work, sweat, and the constant struggle to make ends meet. But now, sitting in front of this woman, who had walked into his life like a breath of fresh air, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: possibility. She had said she could help him. That thought lingered in his mind, as if it were a dream he wasn't ready to wake up from. Was she really offering him a chance to change everything? It seemed too good to be true, but there was something in her eyes, a kind of wisdom and sincerity, that made him think she wasn't just talking empty promises. The woman, noticing the way he was processing everything, leaned forward slightly, her voice calm but filled with purpose. "You've worked hard, Mark. Harder than most people, and yet it feels like you're stuck in a loop, doesn't it?" Mark nodded. He didn't need to say anything. She had hit the nail on the head. He had spent years running in circles, trying to catch up with a life that always seemed just out of reach. She continued, her words measured and thoughtful. Life doesn't have to be a constant struggle. It doesn't have to feel like you're always a step behind. Sometimes, we need someone to help us see the path that's right in front of us. Mark listened intently. He couldn't deny that everything she was saying felt like it was directed at him. He had spent so much time focusing on what he didn't have: money, stability, security, that he had forgotten to look at the things he did have. He had a strong work ethic, a kind heart, and a willingness to help others, even at the cost of his own well-being. But no one had ever told him that those qualities could open doors for him. The woman smiled, as if she could read his thoughts. "You have the most important things, Mark. Those qualities that you have: your heart, your ability to work hard, your compassion. They're not just things that make you a good person. They're the very things that will get you ahead. You just need to believe in them, and you need to have someone who sees the potential in you." Mark felt a wave of emotions flood through him. He had always been the one to help others, but no one had ever looked at him and seen potential. People saw him as just another guy struggling to get by, a cog in a machine that didn't stop for anyone. But here she was, telling him that he had something special, that he had qualities that could make a real difference in the world. "You've been looking for a way out, Mark," she said, her voice softer now. "But sometimes, we need to stop looking for an escape and start looking for a way to move forward. What you've done for others, helping people when they need it most, has more value than you realize. You've already built a foundation, but now it's time to take that foundation and build something bigger, something for yourself." Mark wasn't sure what to say. He had never thought of it that way. The idea of building something for himself, something that wasn't just about survival but about growth, felt both exciting and terrifying at the same time. He had never given himself permission to dream beyond just getting by. The woman watched him closely, sensing his internal battle. "It's not easy, I know. Change never is. But I can help you take that first step. I have connections, Mark. I've spent my life building them, and I've learned that it's not about how hard you work, it's about knowing the right people, being in the right place at the right time. And I can help you get there. Mark sat back in his chair, his mind swirling with thoughts. Connections. A different way of looking at the world. It all sounded so foreign to him. He had always believed that hard work was the key, but now she was telling him something else, that sometimes, it wasn't just about working harder but working smarter. But why me? He asked, his voice filled with doubt. Why would you want to help someone like me? She looked at him, her eyes steady and kind. Because I see you, Mark. I see your potential. I see someone who's been overlooked, someone who's been working so hard just to keep his head above water. You're not invisible. I can see the fire in you, even if you don't see it in yourself. Her words hit him harder than he expected. He had spent his life feeling like he wasn't enough, like he would never be good enough to make it. But here she was, telling him the exact opposite. She saw something in him that he had never seen in himself. Okay, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. What do I need to do? The woman smiled, as if she had been waiting for him to ask that question. First, you need to believe that you deserve more. You need to stop seeing yourself as someone who is stuck, because you're not. You have the ability to change your circumstances, and you have the power to make your life what you want it to be. I'm here to help you unlock that. Mark felt a surge of emotion rise in him: hope, excitement, even fear. This wasn't just about a job offer or a small opportunity. This was about changing his life, breaking out of the cycle he had been trapped in for so long. For the first time in years, he felt like he had a chance. He wasn't just a man working to survive anymore. He was someone who had the potential to thrive. I'm ready, he said, his voice filled with determination. What do I need to do next? The woman nodded, a look of pride crossing her face. Good. You've already taken the first step by being open to change. The next step is to trust the process, trust me, and trust yourself. We'll start small, but we'll build. And soon, you'll see just how much you're capable of. Mark felt a rush of emotions: hope, excitement, and even a bit of fear. But he wasn't afraid anymore. He was ready to take that first step, to believe in himself in a way he never had before. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in his life, he felt like he wasn't alone. He had someone who believed in him, and for that, he was more than grateful. The days that followed felt like a whirlwind. Mark couldn't believe how quickly everything had started to shift. What had once felt like an endless struggle, a life of just getting by, was now starting to feel like something more. The woman, whom he had helped at the airport, had shown him a side of life he never thought possible. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he had a real chance to build something, to create a future that wasn't limited by his past struggles. She had introduced him to her network: people who were successful, people who had done what he had only dreamed of. She connected him with a mentor, someone who had once been in the same position Mark was in, someone who had built a life from scratch, against all odds. The mentor was kind but firm, pushing him to think bigger, to dream of more than just getting by. The conversations they had were unlike anything Mark had ever experienced. They talked about strategy, goals, and the mindset needed to make those goals a reality. At first, it was overwhelming. The language of success was unfamiliar to him. Words like investments, business plans, and networking had always sounded like foreign concepts. But with every conversation, with every piece of advice, Mark began to understand. The world wasn't as small as he had always thought it was. There were doors everywhere, just waiting to be opened. It wasn't about being born into the right family or having a head start. It was about knowing how to use the resources around you, how to leverage connections, and how to believe in yourself enough to take action. The mentor had told him, the first step is always the hardest. But once you take that step, you'll see how many more open up. Mark had taken that first step when he agreed to meet the woman in the coffee shop. And now, it felt like every step after that was building on the one before. Mark threw himself into learning. He worked during the day at the garage, fixing cars and managing repairs, but at night, he studied. He read books, watched online seminars, and attended workshops. He wasn't just learning about mechanics anymore, he was learning about business, about success, about life beyond the walls of his small apartment and his small town. He knew it wouldn't be easy. He knew it would take time. But for the first time in his life, he wasn't afraid of the future. As he sat in his small living room one evening, poring over a business strategy book, his phone buzzed. It was a text from the woman. "How's everything going, Mark?" the message read. It was a simple question, but it made his heart skip a beat. She had been a guiding light for him, and every time he heard from her, he felt a little more confident. He had learned so much in the past few weeks, but he knew he still had a long way to go. He typed back quickly, "It's going great. I'm learning a lot. It's all a bit overwhelming, but I'm getting there." She responded almost instantly, "Good. You're doing the right thing. Just remember, success isn't about how fast you get there, but about staying consistent. Keep at it. You've got this." Mark smiled at the words. They were simple, but they meant everything to him. She had become more than just someone who had helped him at the airport. She had become a mentor, a guide, someone who believed in him when he couldn't even believe in himself. And that belief, more than anything, had made all the difference. Over the next few weeks, things started to fall into place. Mark was introduced to a few people who were looking for someone with his skills. One of them was a business owner who needed a mechanic to help with his fleet of cars. It wasn't the kind of opportunity Mark had dreamed of, but it was a start. He took the job, not because it was perfect, but because it was the kind of opportunity that could lead to something bigger. He worked harder than ever, not just fixing cars, but learning everything he could about the business side of things. He spent his nights working on his own projects, starting to build a small network of people who could help him grow. He didn't have all the answers, but he was learning. And that was more than he had ever done before. Months passed, and with each passing day, Mark felt more confident in his ability to change his life. He was still working long hours, but now, he had a purpose. He wasn't just working to survive, he was working to build something that would last. He wasn't sure where this path would take him, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like it didn't matter. He was no longer afraid of what the future might bring because he knew he could handle it. Then one day, as he was wrapping up a job, the woman called him. He hadn't heard from her in a while, and he felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness when he saw her name on his screen. "Mark," she said, her voice as calm and confident as ever. "I just wanted to check in with you. How are things going?" He could hear the genuine curiosity in her voice, and it made him smile. "Things are going well. I've got a new job, and I've been learning a lot. It's still a lot of work, but I feel like I'm finally on the right path." "That's great to hear," she said, her voice warm with approval. "You've made so much progress. But remember, this is just the beginning. There will be obstacles, there will be setbacks, but if you keep pushing, you'll get where you want to go. You have the tools you need now. You just have to keep using them." Mark felt a surge of gratitude. He had come so far in such a short time, and he knew it was all because of the encouragement and guidance she had given him. Without her, he might still be stuck in the same old routine, too afraid to take risks, too afraid to believe in himself. But now, he knew better. "I'm ready," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "I'm ready to take the next step." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then she spoke again, this time with a note of pride in her voice. "I knew you would be. Keep going, Mark. You've got this. As they ended the call, Mark sat back in his chair, feeling a sense of peace and excitement wash over him. He had no idea what the future would hold, but for the first time, he was excited to find out. He had the tools, the mindset, and the confidence to build the life he had always wanted. And it all started with a small act of kindness. A missed flight. A chance encounter. It wasn't just the woman who had changed his life, it was the belief that someone, anyone, could see his potential. That belief had been the spark he needed to change everything. As Mark looked out of his apartment window, watching the world go by, he knew one thing for certain: this was only the beginning.